Hey everyone! So this recording will cover kind of the second part of the introduction chapter. I have posted the introduction chapter with sound from the third edition, so go ahead and look at that recording and that sound recording, and that will really walk you through the first part of the chapter. So this is kind of the second part, and I know you're going to laugh, but the way I'm viewing the e-textbook, I cannot see any page numbers. So I'm not really sure on what page I am starting from. So you'll just have to find that on your own, and I apologize for that. I'm also recording at home, and I have a dog, so if she barks, I apologize for that as well. Anyway, so let's talk about how the special education process begins. So this is kind of what I'm saying is like the second part of the chapter. Okay, so everything before how the special education process begins, that's in the recording and the PowerPoint from the third edition, excuse me. Okay, so the special ed process, it could begin when either the parent or a teacher could make a referral for evaluation to determine if a child has a disability. So if the disability was evident, very soon, either before or soon after the child was born, or during the preschool years, sometimes it tends to be the parents who make that referral. So there's, the parents might refer to an organization called Child Find, which I used to work for actually in Charleston County. So that's kind of for the younger students. Once a child becomes school age and the teachers, they try and they provide all these high quality interventions and high quality or high leverage practices and all these research-based practices, if a child is struggling and still struggling and still struggling, the teacher could initiate the referral to determine if a student has a disability. But really, the parents can at any age also. Doctors, pediatricians can refer, gen ed teachers, parents, special ed teachers, really pretty much anyone can refer a child to see if they have a disability. So then a multidisciplinary team will come together and determine if the child qualifies under one or more of the IDEA categories, IDEA, and is eligible for special education. Then an IEP is developed. So if you're not sure what I'm talking about here, go back and look at the first part of the chapter and look at the recording from the third edition, and also think about that podcast that you should have just completed about the multidisciplinary team, IEP, stuff like that. We're going to talk a lot more about an IEP in this presentation. So an IEP, what is it? Well, the first thing and kind of the most important thing that we need to remember is that it is a legal document. Legal. So that means if you are the teacher, the special ed teacher, the general ed teacher, you need to make sure you are following the IEP. Otherwise, districts, schools, you personally could get sued, okay? I know that you all are going to follow the IEP, so that will not be an issue. But just remember that it is a legal document. And it is the individualized component of special education planning, right? Because that's what makes special ed special, is that individualized component and what works best for this particular student. Defining what appropriate means in the specific student's free appropriate public education. Okay, so what works for Bob over here is not going to be the same that works for Georgia. Georgia's my dog, by the way. Sometimes I use her as an example. So we also want to think about response to intervention and how that plays into the development of an IEP. And see your textbook for more information. It's that 3-tiered system, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. If a student progresses all the way through tier 3 and fails, I kind of look at it as they fail to make progress or they fail to respond to interventions, then they might be referred for a special education evaluation, right? So then secondly, the IEP serves as a basis for communication between parents and teachers regarding the student's educational growth and achievement. So again, if it's in the document, it's legal, so you need to make sure that you're following that, okay? Again, this is taken all from the textbook. Again, don't have page numbers for you. You're welcome, but it is all from the textbook. I don't know why I can't see page numbers. Couldn't tell you. All right, IEP, who needs one? Well, any student ages 3 to 21 who, is qualified under an IDEA category, who receives special education services, they must have a current IEP. Students younger than age 3, they have what's called an IFSP, Individualized Family Services Plan. Okay, and that focuses more on kind of the family and the interventions that the family can provide before they get to school age. Okay, so you want to think about these questions. Does the student have a disability? Well, if no, then they don't need to be in special ed and they don't need an IEP, right? Does the disability inhibit progress in the general curriculum? Well, the answer, if the child is receiving special education services, the answer should be yes, right? Because otherwise, again, why would they need special education? Excuse me. I do have a little cough. Excuse me for that too. Does the student require specially designed instruction to progress in the general curriculum? What about a student? So this is a non-example. If you have a student who broke their leg, I have one of my undergrads right now. They just had to have knee surgery. So when they come back and they will be in a wheelchair or on one of those rolly thingies, do they need an IEP? Hopefully you all said no, right? Because that should not, just the fact that she's on a rolly thingy or a wheelchair should not inhibit her progress in the general curriculum. Okay, so think about non-examples as well. So IEP, who develops it? This goes back to that podcast. That's why I had you all watch that podcast. So the parents are involved. At least one general education teacher is involved. At least one special education teacher. A representative of the local education agency or LEA, which is usually the principal or a principal, somebody who can kind of promise, quote unquote, resources from that particular school. Sometimes maybe a district person is involved, but typically it's somebody more at the school level who serves as the LEA. Okay, and an individual who can interpret evaluation results. So, for example, a school psychologist. They are much more qualified to interpret evaluation results than I am as a former special ed teacher. And then also other individuals who might be beneficial for that particular student. You know, for Georgia, she might have some speech and language issues. She might have some occupational therapy issues. That's where those related service providers come in. And then the student when appropriate. That kind of differs. Some people say age 14, some people say 16. Just see what your district wants you to do. Okay, culturally and linguistically diverse students, or CLD, and their families in the IEP process. Lots of factors to consider, you know, making sure that the language is not a barrier, right? If you have students for whom English is not their first language, make sure you have an interpreter in the IEP meeting, someone who can explain those results, someone who can talk about the IEP and the goals and all of those things, okay? We want to make sure families and students who are CLD are fully integrated in the IEP process, just as other students are. Okay, more IEP facts. I didn't have a cute title for this one, so that's what I'm calling it. It can be paper or web-based, again, depending on your district. And I know that most, if not all, of South Carolina, they use something called Enrich, which is a web-based program. When I was teaching, we used Tranquility, which was not very tranquil, and then we switched to Accent, which I like better. Enrich, I'm not super familiar with because I don't have access to it. Some of you all actually might have access to it, or you might be in schools where someone might be able to show you how to use Enrich. I will post a couple things that I have found on Google, actually, and that my friends who are current teachers have shown me about Enrich, but that'll be a later time. Okay, parents and authorized school and district personnel are really the only ones who can access a student's IEP. Think about FERPA. One thing to remember, don't talk about your students in public, right? Regardless of if they have an IEP or not, because chances are, guess what? You're going to be saying something ugly about a child on this IEP, and in the next lane over, it's going to be their grandma or their aunt or their uncle or their brother. So just be very cautious, even in the front office at your school, okay? Just be cautious. Remember confidentiality. Team prepares for the meeting by collecting formal and informal assessment data, describing students' present levels of academic achievement and functional performance, PLAF. We will get more into that in just a second. I do want you, if you have the textbook, or especially the e-text, look at video example introduction 1. That's what it's called in my textbook. Check out that. It's just kind of how they start an IEP meeting. Okay, some more facts. If parents or guardians cannot attend the meeting, you need to make multiple good faith attempts to schedule, a mutually agreed upon date and time. Then alternative methods of participation is required, such as video conferencing, which, oh, hello, I think all of you have used Zoom probably at this point, and parents probably have too, right? Given the last couple of years, parents are probably very familiar with Zoom or FaceTime or Google Teams or, Google Meet. I meant to say Microsoft Teams or Google Meet, right? So you all are familiar with that. And in certain cases, and this is not the law, but this is something I used to do, sometimes you have to bring the IEP meeting to them. I had one particular student in Charleston. The mom could not get out of work. We tried. So myself and I was a special ed teacher, a gen ed teacher, a social worker, and I think school psychologist went to her work. She knew we were coming. It wasn't like we surprised her. That sounded kind of shady. We went to her work and she was able to take a 15-minute break and we sat outside, not super confidential, but the best we could do at her work. And we all had the IEP meeting. Everyone signed off on it. Everyone was happy. So again, thinking about ways to make the parents included and a part of their child's IEP meeting, right? There are procedures to follow if a team member, including the parents, disagree with the final IEP. There's mediation, there's due process. You can read more about that in your textbook as well. Okay, IEP, how to use it. Teachers organize instruction to address that. So special ed teachers is what I mean here. To address the IEP goals, okay? And the challenge is to determine how much can be taught and measured in the time allowed, typically a year. It depends on how your school does it. If they say from, August until May, or if they say from August to August, it depends on how schools write their IEPs or how districts write their IEPs. And so you want to think about time for daily instruction or intervention that will lead to achieving the goal. Okay. IEP, how to develop it. You will describe. So these 7 steps, not counting number 8, these 7 steps are the chapters of the textbook, right? This chapter is kind of like the introduction chapter, no page numbers, but these 7 steps I will go over in much more detail in future PowerPoints. Okay. So describe the students, PLAF, write measurable annual goals, measure and report student progress, state the services needed to achieve annual goals, explain the extent to which a student will not participate with non-disabled students in gen ed classes and extracurricular and non-academic activities. Explain accommodations necessary to measure academic achievement and functional performance on state and district-wide assessments. Here's that AAFP. That's where that comes from up here in that present levels. And then complete a transition plan for students age 16 and older. That's the law. Again, some states, and maybe even some districts, start doing transition plans at about 14 or 15. So again, that's just kind of, make sure you're following your district's protocol. So again, those 7 steps are the next 7 chapters of the textbook. I want to show you just a quick example in case you've never seen an IEP. This is from another textbook that I use for my undergraduate intro to special ed, essentially, class. And I didn't want to copy just a link because I didn't know if you'd be able to see it. So here's an example of an IEP, the demographic information, the conference. So this is kind of parent notification or prior written notice, present levels of educational performance, which really it should say academic, what's it called? Hold on, got to get it right? Academic achievement and functional performance. So this might be a little older than that. Okay, then on the next page, there's some annual goals. Benchmarks, I believe Florence 1 does not use benchmarks anymore, but I don't know if that's true for other districts. So here's the goals. Here's the related services. This person doesn't look like they need anything except for speech and language therapy. Okay, here's the assessment and participation. So there might be some accommodations, flexible seating, flexible scheduling, transition planning statement. Oh, this child is under 14, so it's not needed. And, I'm about to run out of time. And then when you will report progress to the students. So if your, gen ed students get report cards, interim report cards every 4.5 weeks, whatever, guess what? That's when your special ed students need to get those report cards, interim report cards, conferences. All of that needs to be the exact same as it is for children without disabilities. And then the signatures and the dates. And by the way, May 12th is my dad's birthday. Not 2019, but May 12th is his birthday. So, I like that that's in the example. And then, like I said, each step will be explained how to follow the IEP. Each step will be explained in detail. We will see examples from case studies from the Meet Our Students. And you can practice the steps in the textbook, but you will not have to submit anything. All right, that's about it for the introduction chapter.